So apologies for the mess. It is very late. So I'm gonna try, that's a little bit better there. I'm gonna try to make this make sense. I started a little project today and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna tinker a little bit more and then I'm gonna head to bed. And then this happened. So here we are. I know it looks like a mess, but basically all of this is just from this, which is ME Super. Getting it to this stage honestly doesn't take too long, and I just kind of developed a new method of taking it apart that I'm kind of stoked about, but that doesn't mean anything because I didn't record it because I was like, I'm not going to work on this too much, and then yeah, I think I have a problem. But anyway, this was actually sent in from a viewer from Australia, and yeah, I just sent it in. He's like, the people here, the shop he took it to was like, it's not worth it to try to repair it, and so if you need it for parts or whatever, like, be my guest. And I heard that, it's like, it's not worth it to repair. Sounds like my kind of camera. It was kind of goofed up. At first I thought it was kind of the regular issue that they have, the infinite winding issue, and I think actually I was working on this one's my personal ME Super. Okay, it works now. But the infinite winding issue is when you can just continue to advance. It's a very weird issue, but it happens in a very localized spot that I can point out to you perfectly with this camera. So we'll get to that in a second, but it actually didn't have that issue. The problem itself was that the shutter wasn't working. So I could get it to advance and fire, but the shutter wouldn't move. The mirror would go up, the mirror was being charged, but the shutter wasn't. And that's weird. So I kind of took it apart because I figured there was a blockage in the shutter itself, and that was the case. It wasn't it was moving very sluggishly, if moving at all. So basically just like blasted the insides out with some alcohol. It's easy enough to kind of clean the actuations of it. Like, there's no real need to get in there to like switch this out. And usually I'll just replace the shutter wholesale because I just don't want to deal with that headache. Got it to actually kind of work, and I will show you that now by firing it. So that is, the shutter's open now, and then to close it, we just press in on this plate here, and then it closes. And we advance, so it's charged, and then we hit down on here, and that releases the shutter catch there, and then we punch in right there, and then that does that. So it's basically just manually firing the shutter. Everything works relatively well. This stopper here is what controls the aberrated settings for this. Anyway, so that's that. Shutter works now, but the infinite wind issue, this one is interesting. So I've talked about this before, where sometimes, like this one in particular, this camera, I've fixed the infinite wind on this like 3 or 4 times, and I'll let it sit for a few days and like retest it, and sometimes it'll work more consistently and sometimes it doesn't. Lately I've been having more consistent results. That's good. Like, it just depends. Like, you have to get the oil like on the right spot. You have to make sure that it stays lubed and all that stuff. It's a very like complicated procedure, and I think that the way that I was trained to do it and the way that I usually go about it isn't the most effective way overall. But yeah, that's beside the point. What I wanted to talk about was the impetus of this issue, and that is pretty much this little area right in here. And I'm gonna try to punch in here so we can get a real clear look at what we're talking about. So basically right there under, let me see if I can, I'm gonna try to autofocus this and then hold it steady enough. But on this, under here, sits like this little bushing. And that bushing is some kind of rubber. And you might even be able to see it, but it is like coming apart right now. And I think this is the first time I've had a camera that I've been working on while videoing. I'm actually just gonna cancel that. Where it's been falling apart. So that way I can kind of show you what I'm talking about. See, there's a little bit that came off right there. And yeah, grab my tweezers. Because I've seen this before a few times, but it was like back in the old days at the shop. But yeah, the little plastic chunk right there. And so when this falls apart, that basically creates a little gap in the system. Some of the chunks can get where they shouldn't be and just kind of gum it up ever so nicely. So for the sake of ease, I'm just going to kind of clean this out because it's falling apart anyways. Get a really good glimpse of it there, and you can just see the rust damage to it. And I don't know why I was like, oh, I'm gonna put this down here on my mat because that'll be smart. But yeah, so this bushing here is supposed to protect the mirror traveling or something like that, and it kind of eats into it after time. I'm not sure exactly why this piece alone got rusty. There was also like a weird amount of mold on parts of the shutter, so I'm not really sure what happened, but it's super weird. And yeah, that was it. I just thought that was worth talking about briefly. In terms of replacement parts, I've not really looked into it at all. I've not seen a need for it myself. I've repaired probably a couple thousand ME Supers at this point in my life, and not to say that like that makes me an authority, but I think it kind of does. And in that time, I've not seen a need for it, but I'm not like saying that this is the best way to do it. There's probably a better way to do it, and a bushing might be needed, but I honestly have not seen it to be super useful. What you could do, and I think what some people do if they choose to replace it, is like use a little bit of, I don't know, some kind of like plastic thing, rubberized plastic, or I don't know, and place that in there. You could probably do that if you wanted to. I don't have any of that, so I'm gonna not. So if you're ever curious as to why ME Supers have that issue, that's pretty much the cause of it as far as I know. Stuff like this breaks down. Then there's also the corrosion gunkage that kind of builds up in here, all the old oil and stuff that sits in on these joints to like make sure things move. That gunks up over time and solidifies, and so you want to get in there and clean it out with the alcohol and then add oil to make sure that it is still working. It came off really weird. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Anyway, that's pretty much it. It's a pretty, I don't know, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was worth sharing. There's also, man, there's a lot of gunk in here. This goes to show, sometimes it's good to kind of get in here. I don't recommend anybody, like, you know, if you're just kind of, oh, I want to get into photography, it sounds like fun. Don't do this. It's not worth your time. But for me, me being the masochist that I am, I find this kind of thing enjoyable. Like, no better way to wind down on a Sunday night than tear apart an ME Super that a viewer sent you from Australia, which also I just think is really cool. So shout out again to the dude who sent it in. Appreciate it so much. It's been a fun little puzzle to solve. But I think that's pretty much the gist of it, was just kind of a partial infinite winding issue, and then also the shutter itself was just kind of goofed up. All right, I think that's it for me. I'm gonna put this together in the morning, I think. But yeah, I think that this should work just fine. I'm going to double check the shutter tomorrow. I should also probably put this back together while I'm thinking about it, because I just straight up almost forgot. Yep, I am. This one's spring loaded, and I think in taking it apart I fucked up the spring loading mechanism, so I'll have to take this out, which is easy enough. And it's just another trial and tribulation, but it's worth it. I'm really glad I got to show you all that. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something that you previously did not want to know. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.